Thanks for joining us on our podcast, Brent.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm great. Excited to have you here and learn as much as we can from you and ask you some creative questions and hope we have fun doing it.
Great. Sounds fun.
About your background and how you got into construction and somebody, obviously being a master today, where did you start?
Yeah.
So I always liked working with my hands. I was always fixing cars and building stuff and doing things. And so I was always kind of leaned that way. But I went to college, couldn't really find my way there very well. Ended up being a history and English major because I just couldn't get into business school, although I wanted to get into business. After I got married, a buddy of mine told me about a school in Boston called the North Bennett Street School, an education and craftsmanship. They have, a violin making program. Harvard and Yale went to North Bennett Street and said, will you start a bookbinding program? Because we're having to send all our books back to Europe. There are no bookbinders in America. And so they have a furniture making program, which is their most famous program. It's a traditional furniture making. And then you have a preservation carpentry program, which is what I did, was a 2-year hands-on, learn how things were built 250 years ago. And so, that I studied there for 2 years. And that really was the piece in my career that, has influenced and changed and given me a trajectory and a space and a niche in the market and a way of looking at buildings and houses and stuff that's just different from everybody else. Came back to Texas, started this business in my brother's garage, started 2 businesses at the same time, the millwork business and then home building and restoration. And those 2 businesses have kind of grown up together, and now they're each their own entity.
Really, really cool. So as you got into it more and more, were you pretty much self-taught as you got into craftsmanship? Did you have any mentors or people that you worked with along the way?
Well, I mean, North Bennett Street was 70% hands-on and 30% theory. So, I learned to be a craftsman there, sharpen tools, and build things. I built a door when I was there, curved top jam, and anyway, we did all kinds of craft kind of things. So when I got back to Texas, there was a guy who hooked me up on the preservation side again, named Tom Clark. His 2 sons are now running the business, but he was a guy who basically said, I can open up some job opportunities for you and really help the preservation millwork side grow quite a bit. And so, as far as my business goes, I was, had a tool belt on for the first, 6 or 8 years. And, the challenges for me always came on the business side, managing cash flow, learning how to take draws on jobs so that, I could keep cash going. And those were probably the hardest parts of my career, were growing. At one point we had 60 employees. My management style is not, I don't micromanage. And so really to manage that number of people effectively is not me. And so, we're much smaller now. We're, there's 35 people working for us. 25 of those guys are down in the mill, maybe. Anyway, most of them are in the mill doing building windows and doors. And then, so it's just, I had to learn about management styles. I had to learn about cash flow. And those were the things that were the challenges for us early on.
Yeah. So what did you do to level up that side of the business? Because obviously, you've grown into a successful business. You started there, but obviously that's not where you are now. What did you look into resources? Did you read books? Did you find a mentor, a business mentor? Did you, how did you level up your, business savviness and skills to tie that into your businesses?
Well, I remember when I started in 2003 was my first year. The internet really wasn't a thing yet. YouTube wasn't a thing yet. There wasn't books were it. And so I read. There was a book, and I think it's just been reprinted about being a subcontractor and running a construction company. I read that book. That became like a Bible. There was another book on the millwork side called The Business of Woodworking. And so I had a few mentors as far as business mentors, had a few guys come in and help. I was just asking and helping anybody I could ask for. One guy, a guy named Joe Robertson, helped me manage cash. And it was a very, um, uh, you're like, oh, that's stupid. It was so easy. It was just, but basically it was a spreadsheet that, week one, how much cash is going out, how much cash is coming in. Week two, and you would project out the cash flow based on your construction needs. And I would build 1, 2, and 3 month models of, when cash was coming in. On the commercial side, it's hard because you get paid every, 30 to 90 days sometimes. And so you put a draw in on the 21st, you don't get your money till the 10th. Well, you've been working since the 1st. So you got 3 weeks before you can even draw, and another 2 or 3 weeks before you get your money. And that's fast. And so, managing that cash in that way was the discipline that I needed. We just, we broke it down in a very simple way, but without doing that, it was very overwhelming. And, because you were like, you look at your receivables list, and you go, I got $400,000 coming in. And then you would go, well, wait a minute, until I know exactly which week it's coming in and which I can't plan and I can't do stuff. So that was a big turning point for me, learning how to manage cash.
Yeah.
So many people are in that spot who we talk to, and I can really have my own personal story in that regard as well. One of the challenges for me was knowing whether or not my business was profitable at any given point based on that lag that you're talking about. Like, it was so hard to know where I was at as a business. And I had one project, you'll like this one, Brent, when we had this historical home. It was a 1923 home. We were having a lot of fun doing all of these crown moldings and moldings, and we were having a lot of fun from the craftsmanship side, right?
Yeah.
And I'm looking at the accounting side, and are we making money? And we're using QuickBooks, pulling reports, and we came across scenarios where there was add-ons, right? And the customer's asking for, well, while we were at it, can we go ahead and restore the floors? Can we go ahead and rebuild the stair? And it was outside of the original scope. And I had no idea where we're at with this job, other than pulling a profit and loss report, and we were tracking expenses, but the overhead component, how do you track that on a job like that? And it really got to the point where I felt bad even putting in a change order and charging, because it seemed like we were cleaning up on this project, and then come to find out after I just wrote things down manually of like all the expenses, the overhead, forget the accounting software, go back to the simple spreadsheet like you're talking about, Brent, and then it was like, wow, we're just barely on the line here. We need to, those change orders are essential for us to actually making a profit on this job. So yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from there. And so many of our audience are going to really identify with that. How did you really discover how to correlate overhead and charge? Where did that whole process of
in my searching and in my talking, I talked to accountants. I talked to there's a business assistant program through the city, and some of those guys, some of those old timers that were kind of retired and kind of looking at my business. There were some smart guys that basically would look at my books and go, "You're losing money," and I was like, "How can you see that from just looking at the balance sheet?" And you couldn't read that. And the challenges those guys would say, well, how much does it cost? And I was like, well, it's going to be around. He goes, no. How much does it cost? And I was like, well, exactly like your story. It's like, okay, well, wait a minute. Okay, let's break this whole thing down, and spending a few nights saying, what really is my overhead? What does it cost me per day to be in business, per hour? so that I could come up with an hourly rate that we were going to charge. I think one guy asked me, he goes, "What are you billing your guys out?" And I was like, $50 an hour. He goes, "Are you making money at that?" It's like, surely. I mean, I'm paying the guy 20. It's a $30 deal. I got to be making money. He goes, "Well, how much of that is efficient dollars?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, what's their efficiency?" And I was like, "I don't know." So dig into those kind of questions and those kind of challenges, over a, 4 to 6 year period. Actually, you become a pretty good businessman. You understand your numbers, and you can look at it and go, "You know what? I suspect you're exactly right that it could be as high as 80% of the guys listening right now aren't making money." And so they're living on cash flow, and they're living on deposits, and they're waiting for that next job, and they're not making money. And so it's a huge deal. And so I'm glad you're talking about it. I'm glad you reminded me about those times when um, you don't know if you're doing it. And I've been there.
Right? We don't want to go back there to the painful moments, but sometimes it's something that we just have to remind ourselves of. And one of the interesting things about the simple math is people don't the labor burden, the efficiency cost, the things like that are the things that we just need to remind people of. You need to factor in a cost, because it's so easy to just take the simple math, $20 an hour. Well, multiply that times 2, sure, that'll cover everything else. And what does it? Maybe it's $60 an hour. You're losing money at that. It is so unique for every business. I think we really try to standardize this and say, well, what should it be? And I've had so many people ask, what's a fair markup?
I had that question this week. They're like, what are people charging for markups? And I'm like, well, that's unique to you. I don't, we got to figure that. We got to work through that. So.
Well, I'll tell you the other thing that I did was I made it easier for me to manage dollars just in the way that we set up our contracts. And so we're cost plus. And just to help your audiences, we include supervision in our plus. Okay. And so because here's what happened. When I tried to manage the job and provide change orders and give here's your bid with the projects that we're doing, there was always overages. There was always changes. It was impossible to manage. And so we went to a cost plus thing, partly because clients were asking for it, but partly because it was easier. But we are completely open book with our client, and it's completely cost plus. And what we said that, look, if you've got a job from $0 to $500,000, it's cost plus 25. If it's 500 to 2 million, it's cost plus 23. If it's 2 million to 10 million, it's cost plus 20. And if it's over 10 million, it's 17 and a half. And so that's it. Right. And so then we are presenting an initial budget to a client. So we will look at it. We'll spend, 2 or 3 days looking at it. Maybe and 2 or 3 days is because you're thinking about things and doing stuff. It's probably a 4-hour exercise. Okay. Where you're looking at it, talking to your guys, hey, and you come up with a number. And so we're like, well, look, traditionally we're building in the 500 to 1,000 foot range, cost per square foot. We think this one's going to be, and you run a quick spreadsheet, and it's, let's just say it's $2 million. So we share that with the client. And if they're like, okay, then you go, okay, well, now we're going to bid it hard. And we spend 2 months trying to put together numbers and building things like that. So, there is a share with the client. Hey, this is the range we think you're going to be in. Okay, we're comfortable with that. Here's a hard number. We're bidding it, right? And so when we go into the job, it's not, and that pre-construction is something we've spending more time on now, because clients get pissed off at the end if you're like, it's around 2 million, ends up being 3 million. They're like, what the hell? And so
right.
If you do that pre-construction, you go, okay, we're really, we're doing a job right now. My estimate was $500,000. By the time we did the pre-construction, it was $1.5 million.
Yeah.
Went back to the client and said, look, based on these plans and what we're doing, this really is a much more expensive job. And she's like, okay, let's do it. Well, that is a much better way to get into that job with those expectations that anyway, I would encourage your guys out there to spend that pre-construction time setting this thing up, so that you're not in hell later trying to, bring a client a bill that they're not expecting, and then just that whole world, which is just so hard.
So a lot of the people that are listening to, or maybe are even new to Cost Plus, are going to look at that and say that that's a huge shortcut for them to not have to put in the work that you're talking about doing. And then they're dealing with the client frustration later of trying to collect that other $1 million that they didn't really plan on spending. So it seems like you have this hybrid approach where you're telling the client, here's what we think this is going to cost. Here's the breakdown. Here's every, line item that you're expecting to pay. But if it's more than that, if there's something that's outside of the scope, you're going to pay for it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And just that with our clients, we're doing very high end stuff. They want what they want, right? And so it's and a lot of times there's a whole design team. There's an architect. There's a designer. There's consultants that come in, right? And so the AV, who knows what the AV is going to be, because they could get excited about a speaker that's hidden in the wall, and all of a sudden you're putting those everywhere, right? It just can be crazy. So, the reason we put supervision into the plus, and we used to have it as a line item, was that the customers were getting frustrated that, hey, we're waiting for tile. Not much is going on right now. Why am I still paying your supervisor, $4,000, $8,000 a month, to do this job? And so anyway, but managing those client expectations, like once you realize how to make money and you're good at your craft and things like that, the next piece for us was managing the client and managing to make sure that at the end of the job, they still like us, right? At the end of the job, they're telling their friends, "Oh my gosh, look at this! Oh my gosh, these guys are incredible." How do you keep that excitement and that level of professionalism, right, going throughout the whole job? And so, it used to be for us that we would complete a job, the client would just hate us, be pulling their hair out. And it was because of budget and schedule. It was because of creating expectations of what's really going on. So we now have spent the last 2 years really trying to manage the client better. And that is sharing budgets on a regular basis, sharing updates. Hey, this is where we think we're going to go. And then, I don't know if you saw my video on the war board. We have a huge whiteboard on our jobs that says, here's the whole job. This is when it's going to be done. Here's what the next 2 weeks like. Here's the decisions we need, and it gets updated. So if you say, hey, I think we're going to be done in December. 2 months later, you explain, hey, we lost a week because of that. Now we're in January. What did they say? I mean, you have communicated those things in such a way that, they're not pissed at the end, right? You have managed those expectations in a way that, things are clearly communicated. So this may sound like we got it all figured out. We do not, right? It's just, it is a constant battle, that we hope to be better next year, right, at what we're doing. And, we're not done yet, but it's, we're better than we were last year, and we hope to be better next year.
That's the goal.
Really, really good stuff. So when you're in that mode of managing the client, you point to managing the expectations. I mean, the expectation part of things is what kills relationships if the expectations are off. And so the communication aspect of being so critical. One of my mentors, he was always setting negative expectations with his clients in the sense of being, remodeling is hard. He would always tell people a lot. He would be, timelines are difficult. I can't promise when this is going to get done. So he was kind of teeing it up, and he even would tell some. I remember one moment where he told somebody, "You might hate us right in the middle of this thing, but trust the process. We really have your back. We're going to get to the finish line. It's going to be something you love." Remind them why they're doing it. And I thought that was, the opposite of what salesmanship was all about, and particularly, cheap and fast America, where, factories and we'll have it there next week kind of a mindset, as opposed to it's custom woodwork. It takes time. There's changes. It's going to be may be somewhat painful in that process. So any other tips on the expectation side of things when you talk to your clients? It seems like you have a really great communication process. It seems like it's kind of based on that.
Well, that's gotten better, right? I mean, I've told a client, you're going to be mad at me at some point, and said, look, this is, there's a pretty, documented, process going on here that, you're really excited and then you're really frustrated and then you get excited again. And so, we're going to hit that valley where you're frustrated and things are taking too long, or it doesn't look like work's happening. And so just, the other thing that we do is, and as I've found has helped, is having me, okay, as the face of the company, not there day to day. Okay. So I have a project manager. Typically we have one project manager for each job, and he manages that whole job through. And so, I end up coming in as, there's almost a good cop, bad cop thing that goes on, that if something's going wrong, I call him Brent. And, and so I'm usually, I'm at weekly meetings. I'm, designing and doing things along the process, so they know that I'm engaged. We have weekly meetings with updates. I go around and look at jobs. So it's not, I'm disengaged, but I've created a layer in there so that if they get pissed, they're not pissed at me necessarily. They're frustrated at my guy. They go, oh, I come in and solve it, right? I come in and help make it better. And that has helped that relationship. So they can be mad at this guy, ask me for help. I can still help, because I've tried to go and solve a job one time. And I was going to be there myself. I was going to be there and solve it. They were still pissed, right? And so it was, I thought later, I was like, I shouldn't have, done that, because, well, one, that client just wasn't going to be happy no matter what happened. But creating that layer does help. I know all your guys are not going to be able to do that. I know some guys like to be there every day, but for the work that we're doing, it has helped a lot.
Yeah,
I like that. Yeah, it's really good. Yeah.
I'm curious, obviously, you've built a brand, you have a brand. And I think the way that you're talking about that is awesome, because it allows the brand to be protected no matter like where the project is going, which I'm a marketing person. So like that matters, your reputation matters, your brand matters. I'm curious, like, as you bring on new people, say some of our audience is wanting to scale, wanting to hire someone, how do you keep the brand through, how do you convey that and train up new guys in your guys' process and your culture and the way that you do business?
Yeah, I mean, we get that question a lot. And I would love to say we have a school and you have to go through this school, right? Because Dan Parrish, when he talks about his business, he seems to have that kind of organization. So I'm not that guy. And so it is a culture learned by, just like on the project management, on the home side, we have weekly project management meetings. And sometimes or most of the time, those meetings are catch up. Hey, here's what's going on in my job. But I've created a culture in there of teaching and learning, so that I'm constantly reinforcing and saying to my guys, look, the goal, here's the big picture goal. We want to be the best contractor in North Texas. Okay. How do we do that? And so when things come up, or when there's challenges, or when there's problems, we talk about, okay, what would the best guys do? Is that level that we're searching for? And so, through that meetings, we'll have times where we're talking about energy efficiency. We're talking about, wait a minute, I don't know if I hate foam. Foam has become this cure-all for us tight house, and there's a lot of problems with foam. And so our conversations will like, wait. Why are we doing this? Why are they? Because you'll have subs come in and say, you got to use foam, right? And so you rely on your subs to provide expertise, but they can get caught into that same grind. Well, this is what you do. This is what we did in the last house. And so, you're hearing me explain things, but it's a constant reminder of the guys of this is where we're going, this is what we're doing, this is how we get there. And typically, people that come to work for us want to work for us. They know who we are. They've seen my videos and the build show and everything else, and so they desire, that kind of thing. But if you don't have that, you're just training, and that's what those weekly meetings are. Is training. It's just communicating over and over. Hey, this is our goal. To have a mission statement, right? To have a core values, right? And so those things aren't necessarily written down, although we've had meetings about what our core values are. But I wish I was better at it. But that's how we do that.
Yeah.
The fact you've identified that as a process, though, is you're ahead of a lot of people that just make the assumption. I've made the mistake sometimes of just assuming everyone on my team is on the same page and
Right.
realizing their mission statement is different than mine. And I need to get that alignment there. This kind of goes back to some of the thing that on the whole guild system, the whole apprenticeship model. Do you see that as kind of being something that's dead? I mean, how do we revive some of that model where you could take an apprentice, turn him into a journeyman? At some point, he could be a master carpenter or a tradesperson craftsman. What does that look like? I mean, obviously, you've talked about that kind of being something missing on the build ship, yeah, right, yeah, passion for
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, we're in a culture. You said it earlier. It's the Walmartization of our culture, where everything people want cheap and fast, and it's a value system that's kind of skewed. And so I think our role is to raise the bar. Okay, the Instagram culture that we are is much of a problem as it is. There's also opportunity there to share and raise the bar. And typically on my videos, when we're doing stuff, I'll have guys that will comment and say, "Yeah, no one can afford that." No, and I'm like, "Well, there are people that can afford it because that's why we're doing it." But but what you're saying is realize what the concept that you're saying. They're slamming craft, okay? And so there's a cultural, well, no one can afford that. And I want to break that mold and say, you just are assuming your client can't afford that or doesn't want that because few people will pay for it. But the reason few people will pay for it is because no one's bringing it up, no one's talking about it. And so I think the opportunity for guys out there to raise the bar on their jobs, because the clients want it. I mean, we're in a culture where people pay more for craft beer, people pay more for good coffee. They're and to sit there and say, you're drinking Folgers, and then, well, no one's going to pay for that good cup of coffee. Well, Starbucks made a pretty good business out of making, going for something that was better, right? They were crafting and grinding and roasting things differently. And so I think Starbucks can happen in our industry, but it's learning, it's teaching, it's growing. I mean, that North Bennett Street for me was my apprenticeship. Getting out was that journeyman and working towards being a master. And so there's I think it's exciting. I think that there is I tell this in my videos that guys like stairs are a good example. We've been building the same wooden stairs for, I think, 80 years. And so I can show you catalogs from 1930, 1940 that have the exact same stair profiles, details, half rounds, all those different things that we're using today. And so that's a playbook of like 10 pages. And if we look at history, look at, architectural and historic precedent, the playbook is actually this thick. And your client would love to have page 222, and you've got 10 pages, and you're just not. You've forgotten what the opportunity is. It's the lost art of building, and the goal is to bring that back. And so hopefully the things that we're doing or trying to do, like the 100-year window, it's a look. You can build a better window. It does cost more, but it also lasts 100 years. What do you want? And so products like that challenge the thing. I mean, I'm helping a guy with production housing right now, and you should see how cheap these windows are. I mean, they literally will start to fall apart within 10 to 15 years. They are gross. And,
Yeah.
you know, I think people, I don't think that's a long-term solution for building. Sorry, I got a soapbox there, but
Okay.
yeah, no, it's a real challenge. And I think there's enough guys out there, Nick Schiffer, Matt Reisinger, Dan Parrish, that are promoting building better. That, I mean, the build show's taken off, and it's kind of crazy what it's done. But there's guys talking about how to build better, and I think that message is taking hold. And I think people are looking around, going, "Oh, there is something better." And I don't know if that was around 20 years ago or 30 years ago, pre Instagram. Because people see things that are amazing out there, and you're like, oh, I guess people are doing that.
Yeah.
One of the cool things that I think, just kind of segueing into what you just said, is a lot of times the assumption is that higher quality is going to cost a lot more, and a lot of times it does. There's more labor involved. But then there's a lot of times where, just because somebody doesn't know any better, they're actually spending more time building garbage because they just don't have the skills and training. And you just see that a lot with kind of the monetization of the culture, where it's not about, it's dollars and profit. It's not necessarily about quality and about that experience of something really beautiful. It's just about how much money can I make along the way. So you have guys that have 2-3 years of experience, never sat under anybody. They don't know a whole lot, and they're charging customers top dollar for garbage. And then they have all the warranty issues. So building cheap can be expensive. To the point of the illustration you just brought up, somebody's paying for that in years.
Yeah, no, that's a whole different deal. I mean, I don't know how much time do we have. What I find interesting, I agree with what you're saying. I was thinking of Richard, and because I think he's a good example of guys who may be listening. Richard, when we first met and he came to one of my talks, we have all these samples of moldings up on the wall, and his mind was blown, right? And so he was someone who was, I mean, I remember asking him, I was like, what are you doing? I mean, because you're a good craftsman and you're putting in crap. I mean, you're putting in terrible stuff. What are you doing? And challenged him, like, quit it. And he was burnt out. I mean, he was like, I don't know if I can continue doing this. And he's told me since then, he goes, look, if I hadn't, now we believe it was a God thing, but he goes, if I hadn't found you, I don't know if I would have kept doing what I'm doing. Wow. So there are guys out there who've fallen into this rut, okay, and they're working for a set of builders, or they're working for a certain client, and they're doing the same terrible stuff over and over again. And I'm sure they're getting beat up. I'm sure they're getting beat up on price. I'm sure they're getting beat up on, speed. At the end of the day, they're putting in things that just aren't pretty or aren't beautiful. And so the challenge I would give to those guys, the challenge I would offer to those guys is that, look, there is a world of opportunity out there, but you need to break out of that mold you're in, or those habits that you're practicing. One of the things I gave Richard is a whole list of high-end builders. I said, you got to go talk to these guys. Don't quit talking to these guys. For my career, if you look at Gary Katz, for the start of his career, he was doing apartments. He was on our podcast. He was doing apartments as fast as he could. And so, then he ended up, all the high-end things that he does now, but that career, that thing. So the point is that I'm 30 years into the business. And if you look at the different compartments of times that I was doing, I'm only a master builder today because I've done 25 different things. And so I've done the commercial stuff. I've done the cheap remodels. I've done and so practicing and learning in each of those things should be part of your path. And if you're stuck in a rut working for a group of guys, you've got to break out. You've got to try some different things. And so, that's what's going to make you better. That's what's going to, improve your craft, improve your skills, challenge you, and it'll be hard, but you're going to learn a lot more.
Wow, I love that. That's really, really good. Yeah.
One thing I'm wondering is, we talk to a lot of guys who accept any job that comes their way. They're like, I have to have the next job. We've talked about that on our podcast before too. And now we're talking to you, a master craftsman of a trade, that you've done all of the experience has led to that. I'm curious. Well, I guess my question is, for the guy who's like accepting every kind of work versus specializing in a thing, can you or a craft or a trade or whatever, can you speak to maybe the benefit of specializing in something versus saying yes to everything?
Yeah. I think the guy that's saying yes to everything may feel like he has a giant, gorilla that he's got to feed. And, I got to hit these numbers. I got to, because when I had 60 employees, that was our deal. Our payroll was just this giant gorilla behind us that we had to keep feeding. And so you end up taking jobs and doing things that you don't really want to do, but you've got to keep going. And so, I think one of the lucky things I didn't plan, but it happened was the preservation piece, the historic preservation piece that put me in a niche different from everybody else. I said that North Bennett Street kind of made my career, and that's what I mean is that I am able to talk to people, and those Instagram videos that have blown up on my Instagram are all taking houses and applying historic precedent to a new house. And it transforms these houses, and it's blowing people away how little changes like the size of a window or a divided light can change your perspective on what that looks like. So I believe that our craft has an incredible historic tradition and an incredible, we used to be private, very selective guilds of builders, and the art of building, the science and the ancient craft of building was something that people protected. And so there is, if you're, slamming MDF moldings in and doing, cheap remodels, you're working in the sewer of building in some respects. The hardest part, right? You're trying to do it as fast as possible, as cheap as possible, and make as much money as possible. And that's a dangerous or hard way to live. And I remember our first important client had no money, okay, but they had a great house. And there are patrons out there who want to support craft, who want to support builders, who want to support people. And it doesn't mean they have zillions of dollars and they can afford everything. It just means that they appreciate craft and what you're doing. And so find those people, right? And the percentage of crappy clients that we have when we stopped chasing money went from 80-20 to 90-10 now. And so, 80% of our clients were chased. And when we found that sweet 20%, it was like, how do I find more of those clients? And, really flipping that so that now, we occasionally have a, bad client. It was because I chased after that 20%, learned what those 20% wanted, learned how I was meeting their needs, and really focused on them instead of that 80 I didn't like.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And probably that level of discipline you acquired in that process as well, being able to learn how to say no, learn that it's not worth it. It's not some people you just don't want to work for, and figure out who that ideal client is, and really saying that's what we want more of. Probably you had some restructuring of your businesses. You spoke to part of that, scaling back, realizing you needed a certain caliber of craftsmen probably on your team. You didn't want to be having this guerrilla payroll behind you. Were there other changes that you had to make in order to chase that 20% that client base that you really wanted to work for?
I mean, a little bit. I mean, basically, thankfully been in business this long, you have a track record of looking back and being able to see things. I remember when I was first starting out, they would say, they would talk about profit and loss. They'd talk about percentages that you needed to have. And they were, what are your historic percentages of, profit? And it's like, I don't have a, historic percentage. So so being in business this long really helps. At this point, we are tweaking, right? At this point, we look back, what made the client upset? How could we have done that better? And so I look at the changes that we made, that communication, the war board, that was a big deal. Managing budget and doing the pre-construction so that we had a really good number going in, were things that we were repairing and doing. We recently raised the price point that we pay our project managers. Through the pandemic and everything else, there was a huge jump in pay that we missed. And so I had a guy project manager, I was paying 60 to 70. He got hired away for 90. And I was like, 90? What in the world is going on with this thing? And I looked around and I realized that good project managers were 90 to 140. And so, and we were in the 50 to 90 range. And so we had to take a huge jump. But by doing that, the quality of our project management improved vastly. Guys had more experience. Yes, I was paying them more, but they were taking care of a lot of our problems better. And so we raised our numbers there, but we also I was able to find people who can solve problems out in the field. I don't know if I answered your question, but
yeah, I like that. Yeah, Brent, this has been very, very fun conversation. We could go on for hours. That would be very fun. Where would our audience find more of you? I know you got YouTube channels. You've written books. Where would we find more of Brent Hull?
Yeah. So, I mean, Instagram is Hull Millwork, Hull Homes. YouTube page, Brent Hull on YouTube. On the Build Show is a great source. They can go to our website. I've written some books. And so on historic millwork, I wrote a book called Building a Timeless House in an Instant Age. It has a lot of my philosophy of what's gone wrong in building and what we need to do to fix it. So, I mean, those are all opportunities.
Awesome.
So good for our audience. Thanks for making time for us. Look forward to the next time. Hope to have you back, Brent.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.